Hello, everybody, and welcome to this fine Sunday morning. Today is July 7th, and we have a special little show for you today on our little side quest podcast we've got going on. Today we're going to be talking predominantly in the general Mario RPGs subject, but focusing more specifically on like the Paper Mario games and Thousand Year Door, which actually just recently received a remake about a month ago. And joining me is going to be my good friend and TTYD runner, Yoshizilla. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Yoshizilla. I'm a speedrunner for Thousand Year Door, and thanks for having me, Ghost.
Absolutely. So real quick, normally we have 3 people for these shows, usually our guest and then two of our staff / interview people. Unfortunately, we were originally going to have Steamed Ham with Cheese joining us, but he's under the weather, which I can relate to. You can probably tell I'm still recovering a little bit from illness myself. I'm mostly feeling fine, but you might hear me clearing my throat once in a while here and there. But yeah, with the weather being what it is too, it's like literally under the weather and, metaphorically at this point. But, that's enough for the introductory spiel. So as I was mentioning, we actually have, we just got a remake of Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, which is, a 20-year-old game that is very near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, myself included. It's why the several times we've had the game on the channel, I think twice at Limit Break, and I've been on call for a couple of those. So it was really cool to see that happening. So Yoshi, you mentioned, actually, I talked to you about this before the call, but you got a chance to play the remake. So what's kind of your thoughts on this? Is kind of just a bit of an icebreaker here.
Yeah, well, the one thing I can say is like the remake has like a lot of update animations, which is really fun. Like a lot of the cutscenes are more alive. And the lighting is just beautiful. I mean, when you go from from the GameCube from 20 years ago to the Nintendo Switch, which is HD, it's like you're gonna have a big difference. It's just the lighting is beautiful. There's I'd say the music, the like kind of remastered music is really cool as well. They added a lot of updates, like quality of life updates. The infamous General White Hunt is no longer that bad because there is a room with a bunch of pipes similar to the first game, but instead of only having shortcuts from like to 1, 2, 5, and 6, you actually have a shortcut to all 7 chapters. But the trade-off is the game runs at 30 FPS and you can notice it, and the text is very, very slow.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the unfortunate things I noticed with that game. I'm like, I love the quality of life change to the game. I love how, like, the music, they changed it up, and it's not just, more, bigger sounding. It's like, there's a lot more theme to it. Like, Glitzville, for example, is named Oolong Town in the Japanese version. It has like a very Chinese theme. They named it, Oolong, which is like Black Dragon, I want to say. Also a type of tea, but that's, a bit of a
oolong tea.
Yeah. But they themed it, with like the Chinese kind of theme to the music by adding like, instruments like the erhu, which is one of my favorite sounding instruments, very underrated. There's actually a track in our RPG Limit Break playlist, which features that instrument prominently, and it's one of my favorites that we have in the playlist, although that's more focused on Golden Sun than Paper Mario. But unfortunately, as you were saying, like, the 30 FPS thing does make things a little bit difficult, some of the physics, and alas, it is on the slow side, mainly because of text. I am hoping at least, it's still been out for only a month. I am hoping at least, maybe we'll see some new strats that, bring the speed run down. And there's a possibility that maybe it gets a patch, kind of like how Xenoblade 2 for the longest time was a long game, and a lot of people complained about stuff like how long the animations on a blade pull took. So they added in a bunch of patches, and then over the span of years, the speedrun went from like 6 hours to like 4, in part because they added like several things over the years. I'm kind of hoping to see that with TTYD.
That would be
But
great.
with that being said, I imagine you've probably been following the game more closely. Are there any strats in the remake run that, have caught your eye that like look interesting to you?
So I will be honest, I haven't seen a whole lot of the strat developments. I've seen like people like theorizing like things that are possible, and like other stuff. But I haven't seen anything notable. The most notable strats is you can do Goomba Trio Skip, which is a thing in the first game as well, albeit a harder strat and only possible on the English version, English slash like PAL version, or US slash PAL. And there's also, you can still do Shadow Siren Skip with a different setup. They haven't changed the trigger, like, with like where like the trigger for the fight is, so you can still jump around that. You have to do a bit of a different setup, but you can still do that.
That's funny. I remember when it was playing the remake, I got to that, I'm like, I wonder if this is still doable. And I thought the trigger was like excuse me, I thought the trigger was like, no, did they make this bigger to prevent you from doing this? But I mean, I didn't really try that hard. I'm just like, okay, because Shadow Siren Skip is one of those skips that's like, it's one of the oldest in the like speed run, like long before stuff like Ultra Hammer early in the GameCube version, or Palace Skip, or Teleporter Room early, or any of like the big kahunas. That one was one of the first ever found, which was nice because it saves you one of the trickier fights in the run. And then Palace Skip has kind of obsoleted it, so a lot of people don't know that you can just jump around the trigger to that fight with the right setup. So that's definitely one of those like OG skips. And there's part of me that's wondering, like, are we gonna see anything similar? Because one of the like tricks that was obsoleted was Fish Glitch, and I'm like, I wonder if there's anything to do with this, because that kind of like morphed into like Goombella buffering and stuff like that, where it's like pressing one of the inputs for your partner like buffers in a couple like frames that you can do stuff. So I'm like eager to see what kind of develops with the remake. It is a pretty faithful remake, all things considered. So it's one of those things where it's like a little harder to, I guess, as somebody who follows a speedrun but isn't really in tune with it, like, or not like, doesn't run it or like actively like glitch hunt. It's one of those where I'm like definitely interested to see some of the strats that come about from there. Oh, I've also seen some of Muzz pointed out that like the physics and geometry of the game are a little different. Like you can just jump over fences.
Yeah, it's a bit different. And like a noteworthy one is, and it's messed me up a few times. So when you ride Yoshi, he actually builds up speed now instead of like immediately running, and that has legitimately caused me to not make flutter gaps because I like don't account for he needs to build up speed. And it's really like I've spent way too much time trying to like flutter across a gap only to fall down.
Yeah, very cool game, but admittedly we are in the Paleolithic age of its speedrun scene, so hopefully there can be something more to develop out of it. But we have a variety of, I guess, topics to cover when it comes to stuff like Paper Mario speedrunning.
Yeah.
So you have been about how long have you been like speedrunning games in this series, would you say?
Let me see. Actually, let me look. Over 8 years. Yeah, that's a third of my life, by the way.
Yeah, because I remember when we had you in for Limit Break 2018, I think was the first that we actually had you on
Oh
the
my
channel.
gosh, yeah.
That feels so long ago, but like not actually that long ago at the same time. I think time has just dilated since 2020.
I don't know, man. When you go from like being like, what is it? When you go from like being 16 and doing a speed run to being 22 now, that feels like a long time ago.
Yeah, I started on this whole thing at like 22, so it's not something I'm as familiar with. But yeah, so what was your first game in this series? Because I believe you said like a long time ago your first speed run was like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and then like Paper Mario something came after it.
No, it was actually it was Paper Mario. That was the first the first speedrun that I did, and then it was Thousand Year Door. And I think after that, I started like kind of testing around, like, hey, let me try Super Mario 64 and Mario Bros. Like try to do some platformers. And I will say it was good that I kind of got a taste of what those games were like, especially Mario Bros. Because I then years later started speedrunning Super Paper Mario, and since I was a bit familiar with the platforming of New Super Mario Bros. Wii, I was like, oh well, this isn't going to be super hard to learn, and it actually wasn't. I would say that Super Paper Mario is the easiest game to get into if you want to speedrun a game.
Mm-hmm.
At least from the RPGs.
Yeah. That doesn't mean it's anything short on tech. That's one of the things I've always loved about watching the like development of the runs in this series is they all still have like genuinely interesting tech, and it's been so fun to follow, the developments of like Super Paper Mario, for example. It's like, maybe give us a little bit of a rundown of what like Super Paper Mario is kind of like a run, and like what kind of draws you to it.
Yeah. So the one downside of Super Paper Mario, I will say right off the bat, is there's no like huge chapter skips like the other games. You can't go from chapter 1 to chapter 5 to 8. You can't do that. But I think it gives a unique aspect in the sense of how the game works is, for people who know the game, it is split up. Every chapter is split up into 4 sections. There's 1-1 through 1-4, 2-1 through 2-4, and so on. And there's something to offer in each level, and I think that makes it interesting for a speed run and even like a marathon, because there's a lot of really big skips in each level, or not in each level, but in certain levels there's like a huge skip that like saves like a good like 2 minutes or something, or even like there's even one that saves like 7 minutes.
If you'd have told me a gold bar would be the most useful item in a Paper Mario speed run, I would have told you what.
Yeah, exactly. To explain the strat a little bit, there's a gold bar in Super Paper Mario, and normally all it's used for is just to sell for coins, but you can actually throw the gold bar. Why the developers gave us the ability to do this, I have no idea. You can throw it. That like if you use it in your menu, that's all that happens. And then you can actually use Slim to interact with the gold bar and then clip out of bounds, and it has allowed for a lot of like amazing glitches and skips in each level. And even if there's like levels that don't have any like glitches to do, the movement is just really cool. Like you'll see like a lot of movement tech used where it's like you bounce off of a Goomba and then you end up on a higher platform, or you bounce off of a squiglet enemy and you end up skipping a section. And yeah, it's just a lot of like really, really cool optimizations with like the platforming and with the movement. And it also gives you something to strive for each run, because since the game is very more movement heavy, it's similar to Mario 64, where it's like if you save like a few seconds on each level, then it's going to add up over time and you're going to end up saving a lot of time. So like the main thing that's actually, I'd say besides glitch hunting, the main thing that's actually like that people try to find is just faster ways to move around. Like one example I can give real quickly is the quickest thing to do after you exit a door is jump. So you immediately want to jump and like start moving like as soon as you like exit the door. You don't need to like do it frame perfectly or anything. You could just spam the jump button. But like it added up that if you start your move by just jumping, you end up saving like enough time. I think you end up saving like 2 minutes or something over the course of the entire run. Wow. because of how many doors you go through.
Yeah, it's always funny to me like watching just some of the silly little optimizations in that game. Like when you go in 3D, if you jump when you take the if you're in 3D too long, you take damage. So you jump and then you avoid the little animation there.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of which, like one of the things I always thought was really cool about that run is, like, casually speaking, I feel like you don't really use the 3D aspect of the game nearly as much as probably you should, considering it was like one of the main advertised features. So seeing how many skips in the game are done by just messing with 3D is always something I thought was amusing.
Yeah, exactly. It's really fun, and Thousand Year Door, like, you don't really get that kind of stuff. I mean, Thousand Year Door definitely has like a whole bunch of stuff that you get to do. But I guess it's interesting when you have a game that focuses more on movement than the actual glitch part of it. I mean, the glitches, of course, are very important, but when you're learning the game, you kind of just get told, hey, just practice your movement. But I think every Paper Mario game has its own unique style to the speedrunning. And this does include the later trilogy with Sticker Star through Origami King. I still actually think that those speedruns are a bit interesting. I think that every game has something interesting to offer about it. And it's, unique. I have experienced speedrunning the first 4 games. I've only done one speedrun of Sticker Star, but even that is actually like a bit unique. Like the game actually felt more fun doing the speedrun than playing casually, because I've been very vocal of not liking Sticker Star that much. I wouldn't say I hate it as much as everyone else does, and I wouldn't even say I hate the game. But like, you just realize that it's not really the best like game in the series. But Nintendo, I think, knows that everyone loves Thousand Year Door, which is why they gave us the remake. And it's just kind of cool to see that's like, hey, they Thousand Year Door is the favorite game, and they loved it so much that they were willing to give it a remake.
Yeah, I remember watching a lot of the earlier developments for games like Sticker Star, and how common of a sentiment it actually is amongst the speedrun scene of like, yeah, this game actually has some pretty cool stuff in the speedrun, and a lot of people just kind of overlook it because it has the reputation that it does. It has really been interesting this past year, though, because like, for the longest time, the future of Paper Mario and just Mario RPGs in general felt in limbo, because like the last one was Origami King in 2020. The Bowser's Inside Story remake didn't sell very well, and Alpha Dream sadly went under, as we say in the community. Rest in peace, Alpha Dream.
Yeah.
And Super Mario RPG was always in this kind of weird limbo of like, people have been speculating for so long, like, are we ever going to get a sequel of this? And then in the last year, just the stocks of Mario RPGs just skyrocketed. First we got the Super Mario RPG remake, a lovingly made remake that like, it has a few more differences, but like is just, keeps the heart of the original. We did actually an entire show talking about that, and we had Pidge01, who has like just an absolute encyclopedic knowledge of that game and like its creation and so much about it. So that was one of our previous shows. So there was that, and then like a couple months later, we're like, riding the high, like it's we're back, and
we're back.
And then the Nintendo Direct hit, and I was like watching Spike Vegeta's chat, and I hear the first 4 notes of that like intro song for TTYD, like that do 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 do, like that part of it, of the prologue, and I'm like, we are so back.
We are.
And then we get to the Direct a few weeks ago, and then we see like the first thing is Brothership, which for those of you who don't know, the Mario and Luigi games, those were probably the most in limbo because their original developer, went under. And then now we're getting another one for the Switch, and it's like, that is the 3rd Mario RPG announcement. Like, SMRPG fans, Paper Mario fans, and Mario and Luigi fans are just like, they're all
getting their food.
We're all eating good. It's like, as a fan of all 3, I'm like,
you're at peace. You're finally at peace.
I am maybe a little too old for the Zoomerisms, but to quote a great many people on the internet, we are in fact so back. So I'm really excited to see, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
As I guess maybe a brief curiosity relating to that. So, you also actually run a few of the Mario and Luigi games. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So I do have experience with both Partners in Time and Superstar Saga. I haven't speedrun them in a while because my main games are the Paper Mario series, mostly Thousand Year Door. But I've still been able to, jump into other things just to kind of like see where, not to sound like, I guess, like I'm bragging with this, but I guess just to see what kind of skills I have in other games. Like, hey, am I good at this game? Am I good at that game? And I found that I actually became very decent in those games because, a lot of the stuff was difficult but easy to learn whenever I tried and practiced. But with Superstar Saga, that one is just, pixel vomit mess, and it's like it's very hard to figure out. And but then once you do figure out, you feel like, I don't know how to say this, but you feel like I don't even know. It's just like you feel like you're just doing something, and everyone's just like, "What is going on?" And it's just like, it's okay. I know exactly what's going on, and you're just like, "This is fine." And with Partners in Time, it was actually Snowy on who I saw him doing the game, and I was kind of like, I want to try it. And so then I ended up trying it, and I ended up getting a decent time. My main goal for that game was getting like sub 3 in any percent. And I did end up getting that, albeit with a decent amount of practice. I forget exactly what my time is, but I think funny enough, I'm still top 3 in that game because the community is a bit shorter, like a bit smaller.
I think you're in 4th, but that's just because Sway and Reef just like.
Oh, never mind. I'm in 6. I'm in 6.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because out of nowhere, Akuma Gath comes in, drops a run on the North American release, which we thought was just DOA for over a decade, and it's just like, yeah, all the glitches that like are exclusive to this one, in fact, you can use those to make up for the fact that everything is inflated on that version health wise. And we're like, is North American like on the North American version on the table?
Oh my god!
But yeah, like there was a huge push in that game in the last like year or so. Like, 'cause it was basically Snowy on, and then like a Canyon, and then like everyone else, and then now it's like there's 5 people with sub 240.
Exactly, that's awesome. And I just looked. That's right. I got 246 was the time I got, and I'm actually looking. I'm the last one that has a 2 above a 240.
Still ahead of you by 9 seconds. I love all bosses. That's like probably
all bosses. That's right. I did one run of all bosses, and I think I was even jokingly being like, "Yo, maybe I'll bop GhostKumo," and I didn't, and I was like, "Oh, shoot."
Yeah, all bosses in that game is probably one of my favorite speedrun categories in just like anything. So.
Yeah, but Speedrun Partners in Time was really fun, and actually here's a funny story that's related to it. So, everyone knows the copy flowers in that game, where it's like, you have to press the different buttons, and you have 4 buttons. So during like the week I got my 246, I had been going to eye therapy because my eyes didn't track correctly whenever I was reading. And so I would go to like my eye therapy session and do some practice, and then kind of like, go back. And then I started to do speedrunning again. And I noticed that I was able to hit the copy flowers a lot more consistently. Nice. And I was just like, wow, that eye therapy is really helping. I think my record for like the most copy flowers is like 150 or something, which I know Snowy on has like 175.
Yeah,
but
for anyone unfamiliar with like the mechanics of copy flowers, as you mentioned, it's like you clone the 4 bros in that game. They all like appear from the left randomly and then just repeatedly jump on the enemy. And you have to get perfect. You have to be perfect on your presses, or the combo just drops. It hits its top speed at I think like 60 jumps or like 50.
Yeah, around
somewhere in the 50s to 60s. And after that, there's it's a 60 frames per second game. There is 19 frames that each bro will appear on screen, and I think it's a 5-frame window. So it's not a super tight window, but you have a third of a second to process which of the 4 buttons to press, and then a 1/12 of a second to make the input. And then you have to repeat this like many times.
Yeah.
Snowyon's record of 175 is like the top viewed clip on his channel, and it's impressive to watch. But what blew my mind was when we were running the game at Limit Break 2018, and I always plan the final boss, like the first phase of the final boss of that game, around getting about 60. And Snowyon's just like, I could make this fight go from 2 turns to a 1-turn fight with a good enough copy flower. And then he casually busts out like a 95 copy flower, which is way easier said than done. And it's just like, okay, so you can just one-shot the first phase of the final boss that normally...
Way to get humbled.
Normally you have to burn a turn, like, with your damage to, like, try and avoid the boss's, like, desperation phase where she does, like, 4 attacks in a row. But it's like, nope, I'm just gonna skip this entire first phase just by being a god. Like, that's one of the things I always loved about that speedrun is the skill ceiling in that game, just from the bros attacks, is unlike anything I've seen in, like, most games, most turn-based games especially. Because, like, action RPGs sometimes have, like, infinite combos. It's like, this is a turn-based game with an infinite combo.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so we've been kind of like glossing around just the entire
the RPGs games in general.
Yeah. I will ask one question and then we'll get to, I guess, the main. I'll ask some stuff about the main game of our show as we've been advertising. Have you actually ever played Super Mario RPG? I'm curious.
I tried to play it, and then I just stopped for whatever reason. The original version and not the remake. I don't think it was like, oh, I didn't enjoy it or something, but I think I was just like, I started playing it, and then like I got confused about a section, and I was like, all right, I'll go ahead and play the game tomorrow, and I just never did again.
Happens from time to time.
But I could maybe get the remake. Everyone's been telling me to get the remake.
Yep, we just last night closed SGDQ with a run of the remake, and that was real exciting. It was kind of one of the things that was like made me kind of excited going into this show, is just get to talk about these games that I really like, and coming off of seeing that.
Yeah, it's great.
So, TTYD, what is it that got you into running this game in particular?
So it was funny. It's kind of like a question to just what got me into speedrunning in general, but it's like for this. So, I was, I had loved the games and I had played them, and I just kind of was browsing YouTube one day and I saw A+Start do, son of a glitch, and it was Paper Mario 64. I was like, yo, these glitches are pretty cool. I want to do them. So then I kind of did them, and then I ended up kind of getting a bit interested in speedrunning because I found out people did speedrunning, and I was like, this is another way to play the game. I'll do it. Why not? And so that's how I started doing Paper Mario. And then I was like, hey, I wonder if there's stuff for Thousand Year Door. And this was before Pal Skip was found and everything. So like this was back when like the categories were split between US/PAL and Japanese because they were so different. And I think it was like the early days of when the category split was, because in the way back they didn't really do a split. Everyone just ran on the North American version because they were like, there's like maybe a minute difference, but it's a 6-hour run, and nobody wanted to learn Glitz Pit, like chat, like they didn't want to have to learn Japanese for the Glitz Pit, and then some people like started doing it, and then I think it was Malio. I don't remember who all was the glitch hunting group at the time, because we later had the likes of, Solidified. But it was Malio was around at the time, and it was like, oh, we can do this. Oh, we can do this. Yeah, it was it ended up being like Japanese was like faster, but when I started running, I just ran on the US version because that's the one that I had. And I was like, there's a category for it. And it was it just like I was just interested in the game, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And I joined the Discord, started learning the strats, and then I decided, all right, I'm gonna do my first run. And I'll try to say this as humbly as I can, or like I'll try to be as humble as I can when I say this, but my first run ended up being 4th place on the leaderboard. And like
nice.
it was a big leaderboard. And I think it was just because I just had like a lot of practice. Like I just really put the time to practice, because I I guess a little like personal information about me. I was homeschooled my entire life, so I didn't really have high school or like just school in general like holding me back. School would take only like a few hours, and then I would just start speedrunning. So that's why I had a bunch of time. And I just, did the run. And I got 4th place, and it was funny because there were people like talking in the group, and they were like, "Hey, did you see the new runner got like 4th place on the leaderboard?" And people were like, "What?"
Nice.
they were like, and it was funny. I think part of me was just like, are they gonna think I'm cheating? Because I had been in the speedrunning community a little bit to know it's like this kind of stuff doesn't really happen. But over the years, I've, I guess, realized, and it depends on the game. I'm not going to claim that I do this for every game, but I've realized that I have, I guess, the skills to be a quick learner when it comes to speedrunning. I've been able to just like start speedrunning a game and like really put in the time to practice, and could usually get pretty consistent with it. Again, I'm not gonna claim that like, hey, give me any game and I'm going to instantly learn it and be at world record capable in the next month or so. Because no, it doesn't happen. But at least in the Mario RPG sense, like when I learned SPM, I think I went from like doing my first run to having like the world record within like 4 months, and I think that is just because of how much experience I had with the other games. So I guess I was just kind of a little like, like FYI to people who want to learn how to speedrun, any game, just put in the time, and you could get pretty good and consistent when it comes to it. But that's how I got into 1,000 Year Door. And I just when you realize that you've got like potential of like improving, then it sort of makes it easier to want to run the game. Because if my first time was like really, really bad, I'm sure I would have wanted to improve it. But I think it was the fact that I got such a good time pretty fast, or like such a decent time pretty fast, that I was like, oh, I want to see what else I could do.
Yeah, and people kind of underestimate, like, I mean, speedrunning actually has a lot of transferable skills. Like, a lot of the really great runners of games I've noticed who are like, they have really good times in like varieties of games, tend to just like, they have very transferable skills. Like Cool Kid is somebody I've always looked up to as just kind of a random, name out of a hat. Dude has like the record in Mario 2 for NES, and he's like a top runner of the first 2 Mega Man games. And he, his ability to go from like, one game to the next and just have these kind of transferable skills, like, understanding how to get good practice and how to like get the most out of that practice, and then also just like the mindset and the ability to go into speedrunning and knowing like, all right, I can get away with this, or just like I'm gonna have to do a bunch of resets. I need to like shake off bad runs and move into it like the next one, like with a fresh state of mind. Like a lot of those kinds of skills, are, I mean, those can be developed, but just by, getting, used to speedrunning. But like, there's a lot of transferable skills between games. And I think it's wild. There's, a lot of those people who can just speedrun a bunch of different games and just like get pretty good times in a lot of them.
Yeah, I would even say, if I can add to that, like I'd say that speedrunning could give you some skills for like, kind of real life skills. Like I'd say that something that speedrunning has taught me is it teaches you, it gives you endurance for like long runs. It teaches you patience for like, the RNG that like happens and that will inevitably kill you. It teaches you how to strategize, because usually you have like routes, but there are some times where it's like certain games where it's like you have to like adapt to like whatever happens. Like an example for 1,000 Year Door is when people did start running the Japanese version, we did have to learn the glitz pit. And so on speedrun.com, we actually have certain Japanese symbols that are like circled for like, hey, look for this symbol, and that's what it means. And so, it, like, I would say that 1,000 Year Door has taught me like a lot of things besides just like, being good at the game. Like, like, cause whenever you do any speedrunning, you have to be patient about it. You have to be willing to learn and like practice. And it kind of goes with like any habit. It's like, if you want to get into a habit, you just have to put the time into it, and you'd be surprised at the results that you can get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I mean, this is just transferring from video games to video games. One of the things, one of the things I've noticed over the years is I early on when I was getting into speedrunning, I learned other people's stuff, and then I learned a lot of the games that I'm really interested in don't have super optimized routes the way stuff like Mario 64 might. So I started to kind of realize like there are things that I can do to improve the routes of several different games, and kind of developing a sense for routing really helped me. Like when I started playing like some really hard games casually, like kind of just understanding the mindset of like, compartmentalizing things and taking them one step at a time and like figuring out how to like optimize each section of this. As like when you play a really hard game, a thing you tend to notice is like you kind of just bang your head on the wall until you find something that works, and then you do the thing that works for as long as it works, and then it stops working, and then you're like, okay, now I need to find something new here. It's like, and sometimes that just kind of becomes like a puzzle solving thing of like, how do I approach this really hard boss? Well, for this first phase I do this, for the second phase I do that. That was something I noticed with that, and to a lesser extent, I think but to an extent nonetheless, I do think it's helped me kind of like compartmentalize problems in real life to at least some extent of just like, all right, this works for this works for that, and just kind of figuring out how to, get it all to come together. So writing is fun.
Exactly.
It's kind of funny you actually mentioned like you got a top time early on, because I remember when I saw the submission for Akuma Gath's, Partners in Time North American version run, and I straight up posted in the admin channel for, the Mario and Luigi series, like, so we need to watch this in full. Like, because normally when we look at, when we verify runs, we like check the start time, the stop time, check, bits and pieces through in there. But like, I think most people are like, okay, a first, like a world record you scrutinize, but like a 5th place run, you're like, all right, make sure everything's fine. We'll check, parts of the run, but maybe not watch the whole thing. This was like 2nd place run version that nobody has run on in 12 years.
We gotta watch it
by a runner who is not submitted, and we're like, we need to like scrutinize this. And this was like this wasn't a capture card. This was like a camera on a 3DS.
Oh my gosh, no.
And we're just like, well, I mean, for one, that means that it's less likely it was cheated.
It was cheated, yeah.
So we're just like, we need to like study this, and I've definitely been there. The record for one of my favorite runs, East Origin, was held by somebody who just kind of came in and like bodied everybody, and we're just like, is this legit? It is always fun when it's just like you come into something and then somebody just like pops off, and you're like, is this person legit? And then you find out that they're legit and that they're like awesome people. And it's just like, it's great.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll have to show you this later, but there's one of my PBs. I think it was like a 100% PB of Super Paper Mario. Like literally, I was in a call with some friends, like speedrun friends, because doing a 12-hour run by yourself is just not fun. So usually I just hang with people on the call. And I was like about to get world record, and you hear Minato, who's also a 1,000-door speedrunner. You hear him like in the background just say, "Did you start speedrunning this game like 3 months ago?" And then he like says a swear or something, and he's just like, yeah, I guess so.
Nice.
But
so yeah, on this subject, actually, you said 100%. Kind of just like as a general question, I'd be curious to hear your take. What do you think is your favorite category that you've speedrun? Because like, I know for Paper Mario 64, you've done any percent, you've done no Peach or no Peach.
Yeah, I've done all the categories,
all bosses. Yeah, and then TTYD, there's any percent, all Crystal Stars, and you just mentioned. 100%. You've done 100% for that game?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So, long story short, like I'm actually curious. What is your favorite category to run of like the set?
Honestly, I wouldn't say I have like a favorite, because it's like I think I like different things about each game, or about each category. Like, well, some of them, not all of them, but any percent is definitely like one of my favorite in the sense of like it's actually kind of a short run, so I can actually like fit fit time into running it in my busy schedule, because it's like, I don't have as much free time as I did when I was in high school. because working adult now. But like doing any percent is just a lot of fun, and it's also just great kind of doing that game, knowing how far it's come. Because when I started running the game, it was still like above 4 hours, and now it's 2 hours and like 16 minutes, and that's awesome. I do want to get a sub 220 at some point. I currently have a 221, which I actually got in preparation for GDQ. I was doing a race with some friends, and then I just got that time, which the game has a lot of RNG, especially at the very end. So it was really fun to get that. But I will say I love 100% just because of how far that's come as well. So originally 100% used to be like, kind of like, you would go like, you would do chapter 1, you do chapter 2, you would like skip 3, and then you'd like go back and like do a bit of the, like you do like the minor league, then you do chapter 4. And I think you would do like chapter 6, chapter 5, chapter 7, and like chapter 8. But now the routing, like ever since like maybe a few years ago, the routing got completely changed. And the biggest thing that killed 100% was the fact that you had to do the Amazing Daisy grind. That is about a 15% chance. Well, it's usually like a 10% chance to get a daisy, but there's one daisy that's a 1 out of 7 chance that you can get the Amazing Daisy, which is what we primarily use. And it just kills your run. Like you're 6+ hours in, and you're on PB, and like you're on PB pace, and you just get completely bodied by like all these daisies that will not show up. But now the routing is like a lot different, to where you do the Pit of 100 trials a lot earlier, and you do the daisy grind in chapter 4 a lot earlier. I think you do it like 4+ hours in instead, which is still a long time. But at least if you can't PB anymore, you aren't wasting as much time as you could be. And I just think 100% is just a really cool category to speedrun because of the fact of like, it's the most popular as well. Because usually like the most popular games are probably, or like categories are probably any percent, 100%. Because people who speedrun know that the fastest category is any percent. But I'd say 100% is popular amongst people who don't really know anything about speedrunning. So they're going to be like interested of like, oh, it's a 100% speedrun? What's this? Like you'll get like a lot more viewers coming in and like just watching the game. And I guess to illustrate this point, when Minato was grinding for partner, all he did was 100%, and his views were like in the hundreds each time. I think like when he did any percent, he maybe had like 60 views or something. And then when he was doing 100%, it was like in the hundreds for views. And now he's obviously got a consistent viewership to now where he can do anything. But yeah, I guess just kind of answer your question. I guess I have two favorite categories. I like the any percent and 100% categories, depending on the game.
Specifically, I was gonna say specifically of TTYD or like of just in general. Specifically
for TTYD, if I were to pick for like the other games, I'd say I definitely love any percent in Super Paper Mario. I do not like any percent in Paper Mario 64. I'd say all cards is actually my favorite in or all bosses. One of those. Like those are really fun. As you remember, I did all bosses for Limit Break back in 2019. The route has completely changed. So
nice.
Hint, maybe I'll submit to Limit Break or GTQ again with the updated route.
That'd be cool to see.
But yeah, that those would probably be my favorite categories because I feel like they just get like they're very unique, and I think every category has something to offer. With the exception of at least in Thousand Year Door, I'd say all collectibles is like my least favorite category because it's basically just a discounted version of 100%. It's like, hey, it's 100%, but you don't need to worry about a few things.
So one thing I do want to ask, I don't know, not necessarily for speedrun, but have you ever attempted the pre-hooktail pit?
I have. I did it kind of casually.
Nice.
I haven't really done a speed run of it. But yeah, there was a YouTube channel that is actually the reason why I like Thousand Year Door, called Miles Luigi. He back when Let's Plays were really popular, he did a Let's Play of Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. That's actually how I got introduced to the game. So shouts to Miles Luigi. He's kind of the reason why I like the game in general, and in a way, like, even though he didn't really get me into speedrunning, he's the reason I like Thousand Year Door, which eventually led to speedrunning. But he did a pre-Hooktail run and was kind of like, we're talking about a video back from like 2014, maybe like 2015, back when like those things were happening. And he was like showing like, here's the strategy that you should do, here's what you should get. And I just kind of like played along with him, and I ended up beating it, which was really was really fun. It's hard, but it was definitely doable. I would say that if you actually speedrun it, it's probably a bit easier because you like there are more strategies involved. In fact, like your biggest, like, I think the one item that you actually get a lot of is the courage shells, because those add like 4 defense to Mario or something. Maybe it's not that much. Maybe it's like 3. And so it makes not bosses, but makes the enemies not do as much damage, which is really cool. But yes, I have done the pre-Hooktail pit.
Nice.
It's very hard.
Yeah, so back in the day, that was like one of the old GameFAQs forum challenges of people saying like, can you beat the Pit of 100 Trials, which, 100 floors, enemy gauntlet. You could kind of, I guess some of you OG Limit Break people could kind of think of it as a little similar to the Ancient Cave of Lufia 2. Although it's not nearly as randomized, but it kind of has that like just long gauntlet. There's like a lot of volatility since you can like skip floors in this one, of just like, planning your resources and just like, having to deal with this, lengthy section of just fight after fight. And well, I guess not really that similar to Ancient Cave where you actually want to avoid fights, but yeah, it's a lot about just like this endurance gauntlet, and you do this before you even end the first chapter of the game. So it's like your resources are, you have 2 partners who are like basically the weakest in the game. You have the ability to upgrade them once, and then you can buy stuff from the early game shops, which a lot of those items are really underrated because items in Paper Mario are actually genuinely busted. But but most of what you get in a like pre-Hooktail pit run is just like what you find in the pit. You hope you get like a good level, like you hope you get good, you get experience and you level up like at certain points in the pit, and that gets you heals, and then the rest is just endurance and like timing your super guards, and it's one of the most interesting challenges I think I've seen, of just like, doing this post-game dungeon before you've cleared the first like major objective of the game.
I'll do you one better. There have been people who have done prologue Pit of 100 Trials, and this is technically not possible because you don't have paper mode, but there's a way to get paper mode basically stored and transfer it to a file. And what you do is you just like... Nice. You just basically go through and you're able to do the prologue pit. So everything that was mentioned is even worse. Like you can't even...
That's ridiculous.
You don't even have Mega Rush Partner. That's like the biggest thing that helps with pre-Hooktail pit is you have Mega Rush Partner. So you can have a partner do a bunch of damage. But in this case, you only have Gumbella, you have Sweet Treat, and then you have the equipment that you can buy in the shop. And that's about it. And this is at least assuming that you don't do any glitches to get to the other side of Rogueport, because there's 2 pre-Hooktail versions, I believe. I think there's one where it's like you don't do any glitches, so it's like traditional pre-Hooktail, and then there's one where it's like, yeah, you can skip to, you can go like get like other things if you want to, but yeah, just prologue pit. No way.
Yeah, so curious, what would you say is your favorite strat? Because I know we've talked about a lot of different strats in TTYD. I would imagine it's not Palace Skip.
Well, actually, kind of yes, kind of no. My favorite strat for Palace Skip.
I mean, like in the game in general, but like,
yeah,
I mean.
Yeah, but yeah, like in the game in general. Well, actually, no, I'm gonna change my answer. I'd say my favorite strat is at least glitch is probably Blimp Ticket Skip. That's just such a cool strat. Like the way that you do it. So to basically tell you how you have to set it up, you have to beat chapter 6 in order to get an email when you get off the train. So you do a bunch of stuff and like set up to get to chapter 6. You skip the entirety of chapter 6, and then you beat chapter 6, and then you get off the train. Then you clip out of bounds. You shoot Coops out of bounds, and then what you have to do is you have to store a jump by interacting with an email while you use Coops. And this is basically going to interrupt like Mario's jump animation. And that's going to store the jump. So you basically use Coops and interact with the email, and then the game is in like a weird state where it's like, okay, Mario jumped but didn't actually jump. So they just store it. And then whenever you change Mario's Y speed and you press A, he will just levitate up. And it is not it's not like a code or a cheat or anything. It is something you can legitimately do in the game. And the reason why you need to do that is because you can't get past the blimp ticket barrier unless you have the ticket. But the barrier is really, really high. So what you have to do is you have to get out of bounds, you have to store that jump, and then start levitating up so you could just go over this barrier and then skip that entire sequence where you have to get the blimp ticket. And I just say it's really cool. But I also love Palace Skip within the sense of whenever you can use the Ultra Boots. There are certain categories where you can use the Ultra Boots to do Palace Skip, and it makes it a bit easier. Actually, I think it's technically obsolete because I think the other categories now that have Palace Skip, when you have the Ultra Boots, you actually have Mouse. So there's a bunch of different strategies, but Palace Skip has technically gotten a little easier in the sense of it used to be frame perfect, but now there's a setup where you can actually, you have 2 frames now, which sounds very little, but it's actually a big deal. It really helps.
Go from 1/60th to 1/30th of a second.
Exactly.
It's like that sounds so minuscule, but yeah, it's still, I mean, doubling the window. Yeah, so Palace Skip just being honestly one of the most infamous speedrun skips in general, of like 4 different things you have to do. And I remember like the hunt for that. Because like back in the day when they were doing like, hunting for strats in that game, I still remember the day that Malio found Ultra Hammer early, which lets you get the Ultra Hammer in Rogueport like early. And they use a different strat than what they do now, because nowadays levitating is a thing, which levitating is kind of just a funny word for me with that game, because there used to be like a category called levitate %.
Yeah. Where
you just use an action replay code that lets you jump infinitely, and it turns the game from then like 5.5 hours to like 1.5. But the like teleporter room early found it on like April Fool's Day, and nobody believed him. He's like, no, it's legit. And it was one of those like fun little things.
Was it actually Malio, or was it really tall or Solidified Gaming? Because that's a big misconception that Malio finds a lot of these glitches.
I think it was Malio. I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, usually Malio, it's usually Solidified Gaming or really tall, 2 great glitch hunters in the community. Yeah. It's usually them that like find the strategies, and Malio just tests them out in tasks. So just a little, I guess, like FYI, because that's the joke in the community that we all make. We're just like, Malio found everything.
Yeah, he was the one who at least like announced it. So
yeah.
But I remember seeing like the announcement, and just everyone thought he was full of crap. Just like, you're really telling us that you can do this big old thing on April Fool's Day? And he's like, here's proof. And everyone's like, oh.
Well, here, I'll do you one even better. When Palace Skip was getting found, so it was 2016. This was the year I started running. And they had been searching for it like 3 years on and off, and they weren't even to get out of bounds of the Palace Skip room. It seemed like not possible. And then guess what happens? On April Fool's Day, I think it was like really early in the morning for Tall or Solid or something, but they found a way to get out of bounds, and they announced it, and they were like, listen, we understand it is April Fool's Day, but this is legit. And Malia did like an entire stream showing like, hey, this is legit. And then 2 days later, Palace Skip was actually found. Actually, no, I think it was the next day. It was Paddle Skip was found on like April 3rd at like 1 a.m. Eastern time. So for me, it was April 2nd. So April 2nd is the anniversary of Paddle Skip for me. But yeah, it's really funny. Like when like you have like these tricks and glitches that people have been looking for, and it's like, of course you find them on April Fools. It's like no one's gonna believe you.
Yeah, and like it's kind of interesting looking at those and just kind of the history of how things have been found. Because the thing about speedrunning is there are two ways that something tends to get found. The first of which is completely by accident. Enough people slamming their heads at a game for hours on end, somebody's going to find something by accident. Like one of the games that I really love to run, I found you can clip in the floor anywhere that there's water. And I found this out just casually in a random run. Like, I don't know how this happened. And then somebody like, and then, you know, one of the other runners of the game saw that and they're like, huh, let's see if I can reverse engineer how this happened. And then found out, okay, here's how you clip into the floor through water. Complete accident. And it's like one of those things that sounds like, how does somebody find this out? It's like enough people banging their heads at a game, eventually you'll find something. And I think at least a few Paper Mario tricks over the years have been found. The second of which is you have an idea and then you just brute force, just like keep on trying every possible thing. And the thing that I think has been interesting about the TTYD developments over the years is it was definitely a lot of the latter of those two.
Oh yeah, it was a lot of just theorizing and like what is possible.
The kinds of things that Malio and, you know, Malio had put into videos explaining how things had been found, it was just like these weren't like the how were these found. These were like the just how do you come up with these kinds of things. And yeah, it's like there's a lot of just hard work and like deliberation that went into those kinds of skips. And yeah, like you said, you know, Malio tends to get cited a lot. I do have to shout out Tall and Solidified because both of them were instrumental in the development of Partners in Time stuff that, you know, because we were talking about that earlier, which was kind of a funny story, actually, of in 2016, we said Partners in Time was a pretty unbroken game. And I think this was around the time of when Migu came out with the first task of the game. We had next to nothing in terms of glitches. It was like a 3-hour and 50-minute task. And then Solidified and Really Tall both show up in the Discord and they're like, "Hi, we're gonna see if we can break this game." And then the first 7 months of 2017, you see like the little Discord icon saying that there's a new message in the Mario and Luigi channel, and you click the Partners in Time channel. It's like, oh God, what did they find today? And it was just for months. It was like, hey, I found out you can do this. I found out you can do this. Can we do this on this version? Yes. Can we do this on this version? No, but here's another way to do it on the version that we want to do it on. And it's just like, you know, we kind of were playing with fire by saying, yeah, this game has been pretty hard to break, and then the TTYD people, after absolutely kneecapping that game, just decided to come in and they kneecap our game too. It was like, it's kind of funny to talk about as like, oh no, but it was actually great because like,
oh yeah,
any percent went from long and fun with like a nice little skill like ceiling, but definitely had a lot of lulls. To this category with just all sorts of these really cool tricks, like, you know, walking on spikes and just like clipping out of bounds, putting like the adults on the top screen when only the babies are supposed to, just stuff like that.
The infamous gate skip.
Gate skip is the funniest thing in the world to me because like what happened for gate skip was, so in that game, the door to the final dungeon is accessible from about halfway in, but you need to collect enough of the game's MacGuffin to get in there legitimately. So it's like you can go there, but you can't actually enter. At some point, Solidified, I want to say, it was either Solidified or Tall. Both of them had things that they like figured out, but one of them figured out that when you roll up into a ball, the bros like hitbox shuffles back like 8 pixels, and like the gate, we were expecting to have to do some sort of palace skip kind of thing because there's like nothing to work with to get through that.
It really
gate.
Was the palace skip of Partners in Time.
In terms of just amount of time saved and amount that it does for the run, like it was. And like we were expecting, you're gonna have to do some sort of weird geometry to get out of bound, and it's like some pixel perfect sub-pixel like alignment kind of movement, and it was gonna be really difficult. Solidified was banging her head against it for like just ages, and eventually somebody finds out about the whole thing with the ball, like it moves you back 8 pixels, and then finds out barrel like Thwomp Volcano skip. I want to say barrel volcano, that's Mario RPG. Thwomp Volcano skip, which you like align your pixels like to an exact extent, like move 1 pixel to the left and then roll backwards, and you can just get out of bounds and skip the entire volcano. So there was that strat. And then I think Solidified was trying all sorts of different things to figure it out. And then this new clip came out, and she was like, what if we just try this? And you go to the top corner of the gate, move less than 8 pixels to the left, roll up in a ball, and you just roll through the gate. It is the easiest thing. So much so that I demonstrated in Limit Break 2018 when we had the game
with Kirby Master.
Like, I asked Kirby Master to get up off of like the audience. He's like, he understands the game, but he's never like speed run it, and just explained the process that literally anyone can do this. And Solidified was so mad that this, because Palace Skip was years of work, some of the most just so ingenuity
like
ever used for a
finding
skip. And it was like all these like things you have to do to make this even slightly RTA viable, to the point where it's like you submit the game to a marathon and a solid 20 minutes of your estimate are just like chance to fail palace skip was like the mindset there. And then gate skip for Partners in Time is the easiest thing in the easiest skip in the entire game. And Solidified was so mad that like I think she called Muzz up like immediately to just like complain.
Yeah, it's very funny. And like it just kind of goes to show kind of when we were talking about earlier on how like when you speedrun one game you're able to like transfer those skills to a different game. It just kind of shows
that too.
Yeah, it goes with glitch hunters as well. Like you have certain glitch hunters from one series, and then they step into another series, and then they start finding a bunch of other stuff. And it's just great when I would honestly recommend anyone to go look at like an obsolete run of like 1,000 Year Door, or even like other speedruns in general. Just go look at what the game looked like, I don't know, 4 years ago maybe. Like maybe it has to be even longer at this point, because in the past 4 years not a whole lot of new stuff has been found for 1,000 Year Door. But like go back like before Palace Skip was found. Go see what the run was like
2017.
originally.
Well, 2016 was when it was found.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, like go back to like an early 2016 run and go see what the run was like back then. It's just like, it's insane to see like how far the run, like each run from like games become. And it's funny because it's like, back then when Palace Skip was found, it was seen as like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. How's anyone going to do it? And it's still very challenging with some elements of like the RNG and stuff. But I'd say like as years have gone by, Palace Skip has become like a lot easier and manageable to learn. Like not even just because it has 2 frames instead of 1 frame, but it's just kind of like, oh yeah, this is possible. But so it's kind of funny when it's like you go back and it's like you have something that's like really hard, and then it's like, oh, it's actually not too bad to learn. Like you could even kind of put that mindset with Blue House Skip. Like Blue House Skip is still hard to learn, but then you realize it's like it was seen as like impossible back then, and like, oh my gosh, you have to be really skilled to get it. But now it's just kind of like, yeah, it's gonna take you a bit to learn, but you'll get it.
There was the streak where I Ate Your Pie, who was like a big runner of the game a decade ago, was the only person who pulled off Blue House Skip first try in a marathon.
Yeah.
Until this nerd over here got it at Limit Break a few, like 2019.
Yeah, at least live marathon, because I know GigaDB has gotten it first try on online marathons. But in terms of like the curse of Pi being the only one to do it in like a live in-person marathon, I broke that curse. And
I remember you were so excited about that. It's just like,
it's funny.
This isn't even the hardest trick in this run. It's just like, this has had this streak of, people needing to take a few times. It's like a failed attempt is only a couple seconds.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you fail it.
But it's just like, you want the feather in your cap on that one.
It's funny. Real quick note, I actually went back and I looked at that multiple times, and I'm really surprised it worked because you have to line up with the toad in a certain way. And I noticed I was a little higher, like a little closer up than I usually want to be. So I wasn't fully lined up correctly, but it still worked. And I was just thinking to myself, how did that work? But yeah, it was great.
So yeah, I guess at this point, we'll go ahead and open up to any questions from the audience at this point. Yeah,
this has really been an entire podcast of like the RPG series in general, but we've mostly been talking about Thousand Year Door.
Yeah, I mean, we're both really into Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario. Super Mario RPG, I mean, we had a whole show about that like a while ago, so I try not to focus on that one too much, but it's just been like the last year has just been eating good. Like, I am actually hoping to see, because like Super Mario RPG Remake is like now faster than the original SNES game. Like, even when you take into account the fact that the credits for the game are like, I think 11 minutes in Super Mario RPG for the SNES, like that would be about 2 hour 34, 2 hour 35, whereas the Switch is like 2 hours 30. It's like, and then sadly we get to TTYD on the Switch, and it's just there is potential. We hope that maybe the game can be brought down to like what a glitchless run is. I would love to see the TTYD remake on Switch, develop some strats to be fast, and hopefully some strats of its own, because that's one of the things that's always cool about like when you have a remake run is like they tend to develop like different kinds of skips.
Let me tell you probably one of the dumbest things about Thousand Year Door that I find, besides the text, and that is the power bouncing. So,
ooh, yeah.
so to explain it a little bit, in the original game, 60 FPS game, when you do the power bounce, the first bounce is 8 frames or like 7 frames or something, and then it goes down by 1 frame each time. So it's like it goes down by 1 frame when you get to 2 jumps, then it goes down by another frame to get to 3 jumps, and then so on. And then eventually it becomes frame perfect to get a 9th jump. So like going from like the 8th to the 9th jump, it's frame perfect. In the remake, it starts off at like 6 frames or something. Or no, it starts off at like 7 frames or something. Then it goes to 6 frames. Then it goes to 1 frame. And then it goes to 5 frames. And then like 4 and something. So it's like, you'd think, oh, well, it's 30 FPS, so frame perfect, it's not that bad. It is hard for whatever reason. Like, I was wondering, I was asking my friends, I was like, hey, am I the only one that's really bad at power bouncing? They were like, no, it's stupid. And then Glenn, I believe, found out that, yeah, for whatever reason, getting the 4th power bounce is frame perfect, but then it goes back up to like, to like 5 frames and something. It's like, why did they do this?
I mean, it's a 30 frames per second game, so that's a 30th of a second, but it's still hard. And I remember seeing that like tweet like circulate in places that have nothing to do with speedrunning. It's like everyone looked at this like, oh, they don't like power bouncing, because they know that skill is busted. Like, that's broken, and the ability to repeatedly hit an attack in a game with damage numbers that low means that any buff to damage just skyrockets it. Because that was like when Bug Fables came out, and a lot of the Paper Mario people were gravitating towards that because they hadn't had a Paper Mario RPG in 12 years. Well, actually 15, but I'm counting Super Paper Mario because at that point we were kind of desperate for anything to do with that.
Exactly.
And when everyone was when we were routing that game, it was funny. We're like immediately assuming, okay, anything that hits multiple times is busted. And I was the first. There was one person who did a run that had like kind of I don't know how thorough their route was, but I ended up routing the game myself, just like completely independent from everyone else. Almost nothing of what I did in the route ended up in the route like after like more people started working on it from the community. But like my early strat involved like doing an entire side quest for one really like strong ability. And it's like, this is just something that hits multiple times that already has high base damage. So we just buff it to high hell and just like, just eviscerate things. So yeah, multi-hit stuff is broken. Like I think that's part of the reason they inserted power bounce caps in the original, which I still think that that's like kind of evil now that I think about it. Because it's like so much of the speedrun history of Paper Mario 64 is hinged around like, all right, if you go into Bowser and you get 3 capped, your run dies.
Well, hey, at least in Thousand Year Door, we technically don't rely on power bouncing in any percent anymore. We rely on a really overpowered Yoshi.
Yoshi, my boy. That's one of the funny things to me about the development of that game too. Because it was like it used to be you had to, get so much money and then you dump everything into Mario. And then now the partner is like the carry of the run.
Yeah, exactly. Like no one thought for a second to use Yoshi or even like Goombella's multi-bonk. It's like, why are we getting power bounce? Like, why are we buffing Mario? What? And then now the strat is basically just tank with Mario and then let your partner do damage.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it's really cool. Like, again, a lot of different strats that have developed over the years. Not even like just glitches. It's just like different ways of fighting enemies and bosses.
So I got a question for you. It's kind of related to one I asked before, but this is one that I think comes up a lot for people who like these games. Do you prefer 64 or TTYD?
Oh boy, opening up that can of worms. I definitely prefer Thousand Year Door because I think you've probably heard this answer. I think it does everything that 64 does, but better and like a wider spectrum in the sense of like the original game takes place in the Mushroom Kingdom. And you have like a bunch of these these, you have Toads, you have Koopas, you have Goombas, you have Boos, you have Shy Guys, you have this. It's like, it's all kind of like, standard Mario enemies. And then Thousand Year Door, it's like, hey, it takes place in a completely different town. There are X-Nauts. What are those? Who knows? Are they toads in disguise? I don't know. You've got, bandits, which is just like a different version of Shy Guys, but I think that's pretty cool. You've got Bowser struggling to be the main antagonist. And you have different areas, and I just think it's just really cool because it's like, it's like in the sense of like you do have like enemies and like people that you recognize, but then you have people you don't recognize, like Shadow Queen. That's really cool. Like like a 1,000-year-old demon behind a door. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, like I'm ever so slightly partial to 64, but like I loved, like you said, I think what makes me love T2ID is that it to me is like the platonic ideal of a sequel. It is, let's take everything we did really well in this game and then like kind of try and find ways to build on it, improve on it. Like, because one of the things I always liked about the original was the world is surprisingly alive. Like there's a couple of NPCs that you actually like, as you go on your journey, there's a couple of NPCs that like go to all the locations that you go to, and they all like comment like, hey, hey, we're the traveling sisters, and here's our journey to this area. And it's just the little touches that just build the world up, like stuff like that I always thought was really cool. And then like TTYD one ups it a little bit, excuse the pun, where you have like, there's like an NPC.
The traveling sisters, I think, are from Thousand Year Door. I believe
there's like I think there's like a trio as well in the first game.
Yeah, I think it is. But yeah, you're right.
So
they brought it back.
Yeah, and then there's that like the disco dog NPC that like keeps trying to hit on Goombella, and like you see him everywhere, and it's like you finally get to Far Outpost. He's like, oh my god, it's so cold, I need to go home. It's just like the way, the world is like built up is surprisingly, there's surprising amounts of depth to that. And then like in TTYD, you have like that NPC in Rogueport that it's just like, he fills you in on so much lore for the game that's just like missable. And it's like, if you don't feel like you need it, like it's, the game's fine as is, but there's just like these little things. There's like, Luigi's whole story of like, he's doing an adventure parallel to yours. And then like, they add the little bit of intrigue where when you talk to his NPC buddies, like half of them tell you that, oh, Luigi is lying and exaggerating about these details. This is what actually happened. And it's just like Luigi is kind of an unreliable narrator. And it's just the little things like that in TTYD are I think they go a long way in like really building the game up as like this, you know, larger story than just like the crystal stars and the X-Nauts.
Yeah, exactly. They actually took out the traveling minstrel, I think is what his name is. They took him out in the remake, which I thought was interesting. So you can't really find out the lore of like Thousand Year Door anymore. Like you're talking about the guy on the roof, right?
Yeah, he's still there.
Is he?
I confirmed. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They did add in the remake the traveling martial artist guy, which was mostly just like a tutorial for like, here's how you do combat. But yeah, I don't think they took out too many things, but it's like it was a pretty faithful remake apart from the frame rate,
the slow text.
I want to say I think the game was made in the Origami King engine, so
probably
that because like there's some physics oddities in that game too. But yeah, I'm definitely hoping that, you know, maybe we can see some developments of that game, and maybe, fingers crossed, Nintendo adds a patch that lets you actually speed up the text boxes,
or maybe even skip the cutscenes like it does in what is it, in RPG, like you can fast forward the cutscenes or something.
Yeah, certain cutscenes can be skipped in that one as well, I believe you can skip like a couple of cutscenes in the TTYD remake, but like if you're familiar with, you know, modern Pokemon games, they have that feature. They rarely let you use it. So fingers crossed. It is still developing. I know a lot of people just like doing remake runs because it's just kind of chill vibes. It's kind of captures that spirit of like the old, you know, 6-hour, mostly glitchless runs from back in the day. And it's just like, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to spend my entire day playing TTYD. We're going to get in a race and we're going to have fun with it. So, you know.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as competitive, but that doesn't mean it's not still fun and interesting.
Exactly.
But so with that, I think we're going to wrap it up here. But thank you very much for joining me. Just, you know, the usual spiel. Where can people find you, and what do you have to say?
You can find me twitch.tv/Yoshi_Zilla. It was right there for a second. I don't stream as consistently as I used to, but I'm going to try and get back into it. And I will, you know, probably do some more Thousand Year Door. For anyone wondering if I'm speedrunning the remake, that is a definite no. Not right now, at least. Because the game is like over 7 hours long. And if I'm going to spend that much time, like, I guess to illustrate that point, I could speedrun 100% of the original game faster than the Thousand Year Door remake of any percent. So I don't have plans to speedrun the remake right now, but you can still find Thousand Year Door content on my channel whenever I decide to stream it, and you know, it'll be a good time. But if you want to see people who do speedrun the remake, you can follow Sway NC, who's another speedrunner, and he great. Actually
can vouch for him.
I think he's currently doing a race right now with people. So if you want to see like the Switch version right there, you can go watch some of the other runners do it. None from me so far, though. You should check out this guy as well. Oh, this way is backwards for me. You check out this guy, you know, because he's great. He's great.
I'm the host here. You can't shout me at.
Sure, I can.
It's fine. All good. Thank you very much for joining me. We're gonna kick it off to, I guess, a brief intermission and then cut the stream. But thank you all so much for watching. It's always a pleasure to do these kinds of shows. We're gonna be looking. We kind of went on a little bit of hiatus, but you know, now that stuff like GDQ is wrapped up, we are gonna be looking to do some more of these shows now that we are in the off season. Yeah, look forward to what we have coming in the next few weeks. I believe we have actually the Final Fantasy Relays also coming up in a little over a month. Yes, so that's going to be in the middle of August. We have a pre-show for that as well. We also have in about a week a Dragon Warrior 4 international community race to showcase that game on the channel. So we do have plenty of stuff for you to check out. So please Stay tuned for those of you on YouTube and on Twitch. And with that, we will bid you adieu.
Take care.